Actually, globally, there is a decline in democracy. There is an erosion of democracy. There are even questions on whether democracy perceived is real or imagined, or designed as a facade for those who acquire and retain power to enjoy. But taking democracy as it is, one of the biggest questions is that, is it in a free fall? And people have various views about that. Some schools of thought are saying, no, democracy is still very strong. So is there a future for democracy? Democracy is definitely under stress, but will it buckle and collapse? Then there are those who say, yes, democracy is in danger. The citizens no longer have the capability to hold to account those in power. Even when they try, they fizzle. Either capital fights them, or military might fights them, or hired academics fight them, or a captured media, and so on. But for now, we are settling to the idea that we have a very undemocratic dilemma. Even when we have tendencies of democracy, progress as has been shown, to what extent are people's popular views translating into popular policies to make each and every one of us become better? So how do we hold democracy not to backslide? So we have a very distinguished panel that is going to lead us in that debate. We are having about 1 hour before we leave here. So we shall have about 30 minutes with the panel or less, and then another 30 minutes for the plenary, where we shall engage both, even those of you who are here and those who are online. As I invite a panelist, I will request them to move to the pedal and have a seat of their choice. I will follow the list as displayed. Honorable Francis Edward Babu. He's a former member of parliament, cabinet minister, politician, businessman, scholar of democracy. Welcome him, please. Thank you so much for honoring this invitation. We have any, wherever you feel most comfortable. We have the Honorable Winnie Chiza, a former member of parliament, former leader of opposition, current politician in leadership in a political party, and also a public intellectual who is always sharing her views on the popular media. We have Dicta Asimwe, a senior journalist and freelance writer. Please welcome her. We also have Dr. Moses Isova. Is he around? No. And finally, the guy who tries to whip political parties who are in power, Dr. Lawrence Mary Serwambara, ED iPod. Please welcome them once more. And since Moses is here, then I also have the opportunity to go to the high table. Right. I will begin with you, John Mary. Lawrence Mary. 2005, we went into multi-party politics. Thereafter, after the new constitution, We had a referendum and so forth. Some people opposed it and eventually they accepted. We are now into what we are calling a multi-party dispensation. iPod has been very influential in some of the space. Would you like to share your thoughts on where do you see us? Are we progressing? Are we retrogressing? Are we stunted? Or are we making significant progress and therefore we consolidate? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like, first of all, to appreciate the report of Afrobarometer and the highlights thereunder. It's a generally appreciated position that there is a global recession of democracy. And I wouldn't want to say Uganda is an island of some sort. So the report is actually a true reflection of the global trend, Uganda inclusive. But I think as we look at the declining state of democracy in the country, we may need to interrogate a few other things. One is, does the democracy we have today, in its definition, serve the interest of Uganda, of Africa, and the world? I think that's a very important question. I am one of the very strong believers that if democracy is going to serve or is going to work for the people, it should actually be based on the social support system. What we have here, if you look at the building blocks of democracy, in Uganda, are they based on what we think, our values, our customs, our traditions, or not? I believe one of the reasons, and I have this contention at a personal level, a contention and a conviction that it is going to take us centuries and centuries. Because if you look at the history of democracy, we started at a time, democracy came from, first of all, we had people who came from out of Africa. They came as settlers. And when they came as settlers, eventually the colonizers came. There was some sort of democratic system that we had. It was eroded, but it worked for the people then. What we have now, the parameters of democracy, I feel do not relate to the Africans, to the Ugandans, in what I could say is the essence of being. And if this democracy is going to serve our interests as Ugandans, then we need to first of all analyze what's the preference of Ugandans. It is true by nature that democracy in a way will need to be tailor-made to the specific types of regimes or systems. What is our system here? If, for instance, we look at the central region, the northern region, the western region, the eastern region, if we spoke to what serves us, as Ugandans, does the democracy we speak of today work? So all the way from 2005, when we had the opening up of the political space, and that's why you see that at the start we had from the report, the supply side was big. But the civic consciousness, the realization of what serves my interest has outpaced what government can serve. And so I think it is important that we have a discussion of what much can government provide, or yes, what much can government provide.
Shed light on those issues. Would like to pick your mind. You may begin by giving your general appreciation of the Afrobarometer survey, your quick thoughts about it, and then you give us your insight, brief insight into the question of service delivery and rule of law as tenets of
our democracy was different. The British ruled us directly through our kings. Most of our schools were missionary schools. And we had peace. Buses with all sorts of dust. And we grew up. There was peace. People were happy. We sold our cotton. We sold our coffee. Here are symptoms of. What do we understand about overhaul? We know our mothers. We have respect. We have conventions. And by the way, Ugandans, I used to be a pilot at one time. I traveled throughout Africa. Uganda is probably one of the most cultured country on the African continent. If we became very serious and we used our culture very well, this democracy will sprout tomorrow. And you will have a very good democracy in this country. But we must start somewhere. I like to finish. They've given me a short time, sorry. But I wanted to read this. I picked it up in my investigations. And it was written by Socrates 2,000 years ago. What Socrates said about democracy about 2,000 years ago, he said, the democracy must fall before it would try to tailor to everyone. The poor will want the wealth of the rich, and the democracy will give to them. Young people will want to be respected as elderly, and democracy will give it to them. Women will want to be like men, and democracy will give it to them. Thieves and fraudsters will want important government functions, and democracy will give it to them. And a time when thieves and fraudsters finally democratically take authority because of criminals and evildoers want power, there will be worse dictatorship than in oligarchy. That is Socrates. That's exactly what we have now. Don't be deceived yourselves. We put on suits and pretend we are not good people, and therefore I like to end by saying, Mr. Professor, we need to change. We need a paradigm shift. We need to change our style. We need a mindset change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Babu. He has questioned our understanding of democracy, and he says, can we Africanize it? But actually, Honorable Babu, you may think that these Harvard professors, and they may also not even know even the American democracy, they may not even know it as it is. Because the question is what is stated, what is practiced, even by the high priests of democracy. We're going to the second last round of the sitting panel. If you have any other thought that you would wish to have put across, but because of time, you can use to put it up. And I also request our presenter to come and join, because after you have shared your thoughts, then we shall allow the members who are here and those who are online to also share their thoughts. Just in a minute or two, you can give us your most critical thought about democracy, and I would wish still to pull you to the concept of multipartyism, because you are occupying that space through iPod, and it was deliberate that we pick it from you and not from them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. First of all, like I said, for me, this report, there are things that I'm taking away. And this week, when we have a meeting with the secretaries that are in Parliament, one of the things that I'm going to, to poke them over is the appreciation of Ugandans for multi-party competition. Because that's, it's a window that I think should be so much utilized. And I will put it out to them and say, look, how do we respond as iPod? How do we respond to this quest of Ugandans? That's one of the big takeaways. I also, the other things that I'm picking away from this report is the theoretical model that was presented that seems to cluster a majority of African countries in the consolidation stage. Uganda, we are not an autocratic, we are not under an autocratic regime, neither are we in the realm of the democracy. So it's also one good highlight. But in a few seconds, my biggest, or what I would like to put to Ugandans out there is, one, I like what Honorable Winnie and Francis Babu have shared. I also alluded to it at the start, that democracy in Uganda should not be looked at in the lens of subjective idealism. We need to look at democracy in Uganda, a democracy that speaks to our culture and tradition. It's very, very important. That's one. Then two, my understanding of democracy is that democracy is a social process that requires acculturation. I am Catholic. Vatican II looked at, how forms of expression of faith, and they came up with what they called inculturation. Inculturation means that if Africans, or if the Americans, if Europeans are to praise, we should not have one bonded whatever. How do they express themselves? And that is acculturation. How do Ugandans want to express democracy? That's very important. As long as we don't pick that, because it means we have to assimilate different cultures in our society. And finally, the process of democracy, it's not only here in Uganda, but across, but of particular interest here. We need to have a mindset that what we are building requires consensus among all stakeholders. The definitions of democracy are not in the hands of the leaders, not in the party presidents, not anywhere. The ordinary Ugandan out there, in my village, in my mom's village, thousands of miles away, will want to make an input and say, what does this mean? And for as long as we do not get there, even the political parties, because political parties are aggregation of public interests, the aspirations and where they want to go. At the end of the day, we will have vehicles of political parties that have empty seats. And until we get to that point, we will continue serving the interests of a few, those of us that will define democracy ideally, but not in real time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dicta, your major takeaway?
So I will start at like the report said, people usually are active politically during the elections, and after that we revert to what I would argue is a single party system, that political parties are only able to properly moderately operate when it's during elections, and after that we revert to a single party system. And because of that, it's harder for people to demand for accountability, because one thing that someone I was talking to pointed out is that between that period of campaigning, for example, those with money start to erode representatives that might seem problematic, which means by the next election, some of the leaders that should have led that multi-party operation are no longer as convicted as they were in the beginning. And for that to work, we have to figure out a way for the people to demand for accountability and justice. Because yes, the president might have dictatorial tendencies, as Honorable Winnie has pointed out, but we also have to remember that that justice, that accountability, that freedom is never given. We have to demand for it. It is taken. And for that to happen, we have to see the different institutions, including the media, coming up and providing the voice that people need to fight for their rights. One of the opportunities that I see now is that there is an increasing number of media houses that are donor funded. If they can manage to straddle if they can come up with the right balance, because we've seen NGOs closed by the NGO Bureau and others, but if they can come up with the right balance to make sure they stay around and are also serving the people, then maybe it gives us an opportunity for the media to become, to serve us better than it currently is. Because the problem right now is that the existing media houses serve capital more than they serve the people. So if these other NGO or donor-funded media houses can then provide the leadership, the thinking, because the problem with serving capital, for example, is that media houses have shrunk themselves in the interest of making profit. This means there is not enough time to do stories, to do the quality of stories, which in the end leads to mostly media houses leading with adverts, and whether it's I call them adverts because if you go to the media center and the minister says we have done this, and that's what you produce on the front page, or you go to some NGO and they say this is what's going on and that's what you produce, you're really producing adverts and not journalism. So and that's because media houses have shrunk themselves so much, they are not investigating stories, they are only depending on what they are told. Or hopefully the existing media houses can reorganize themselves to better serve the people, which my view is for now they are not doing. And this is especially a problem because print, usually in any country, print is, they are the thinkers, the New Vision, the Daily Monitor, those are the thinkers that then lead the broadcast. If print is not serving as it should, I should say print, but now there is the alternative on online, but the thinking media houses are not serving as they should, we have a problem, and that has to be corrected.
Thank you. Honorable Winnie.
I think
Your most premier thought.
yes, reading through the report and listening into the colleagues speak, I get a feeling that I think the report calls us to having a very serious thought about reviewing our constitution to again re-invite the age and term limits so that citizens can be comfortable that the checks and balances that were originally thought about bearing in mind our past can be realized once again. And listening into the senior citizen, Captain Babu, I realized that possibly the state at which Mwalimu Nyerere held up Tanzania, Mwalimu Nyerere had the people at the back of his mind. He had a leadership that put people first. That is why he had to tighten his belt and ensure that the system is built to live beyond him. The system that we have here is just focusing on individuals. When someone takes up leadership, it is all about him and possibly those who are close to him, which is contrary to what Mwalimu Nyerere did. And that is why the democracy that is working in Tanzania, even when you look at the report, the survey, it will show that Tanzania is still progressing, while some of us are going into recession because democracy is rotating around a few individuals. The other issue is that we have completely avoided the issue called the civic engagement and civic education. When my sister Dicta talks about the media talking to itself, the media is composed of human beings who have flesh, who have blood, who have families to take care of. When you see your friend being beaten on the streets, will you talk about the same thing tomorrow? When you see your friends' nails being plucked off because they have written a certain story, will you go ahead and publish the same story? Let's not appear like we are living in a different world. The media is really getting a challenge, and they are put in a corner to the extent that I think they have just complied. It's not their intention. They have been intimidated, and the intimidation was reported in the report, that some citizens feel intimidated, and this intimidation causes them not to speak about issues that they should have spoken about. I can tell you that there are Ugandans who really mean well for this country, and they think that the regime, the current regime, is doing certain things wrong, but they can't stand in the open to speak openly about it, for fear either of losing their jobs, and the economics was talked about in the report, that either some people will just not speak about the way democracy is working because of the economy. You look at your economics and say, oh, why? I am still keeping this job. I have to keep it for the survival of my family. And you don't talk about the certain ills. I can say that violence, we have a lot of violence in this country, not because of the wrong people around us, but because of those who have seen the ills in our society and are keeping quiet about it. They are coming for those today, and you keep quiet. When your turn comes, nobody will speak for you. So me, I just would like to use this opportunity to call upon all citizens of Uganda. Let's demand for one, accountability. Let's demand for free and fair elections. Democracy is not about having elections on a regular basis, but also has a component of having free, transparent, and fair elections. That is when democracy can be real. When Senior Babu was speaking and talking about our values and traditions and how they are heavily embedded into our cultures, and therefore our cultural leaders being at the apex of the democracy that we had then, I said, oh my God, why then could have our leaders put this provision into the constitution that cultural leaders should be apolitical or should not participate in politics? They can only speak about it, like someone said, when it matters to them. I would then call upon all of us as citizens to begin talking hard about issues that matter to us. I know there is a cost that we have to pay when you are in a democracy that is going downward. There is a cost that you have to pay. We better be ready for this cost and be prepared. It may be worse than going into a real dictatorship. At a stage where we are, we can still have some driving force. We can still drive the van to where we want to take it.
Thank you, Honorable.
It is not easy, but we have the potential to do it.
Thank you so much. Francis Senior.
Thank you very much. Again, let me thank Afrobarometer for the job done. I want to also thank the funders. It's really very kind of you. And there's nothing wrong. What has come out is very clear for what it was available to them. They've done a good report. It's quite good. But there is a little bit more to it. Now, when you talk about Dr. Julius Kambarage Nyerere, a lot of people don't see one thing, is that he realized a long time ago that the average human being has to follow a conflict theory. The conflict theory is that we must live. And there is conflict in society. That conflict has to be overcome. To do that, we need good management. To manage, we need some sort of system. The system we're talking about here is democracy. Now, he realized the only way they could understand it, he came out with very simple methods of doing. First of all, he united his country using a language called Swahili. Secondly, he used a very simple, a lot of people thought was communism. He called it Ujamaa, which meant brotherhood. He cemented the average person, began realizing that he was included. So the average person in this country he is part of the society. And when we go to our villages, actually people on villages know each other. I was just telling somebody the other day, said, in our village, there are certain homes where leadership is. And when we have functions in the village, that's where we go. That's where we sit. Nobody elected them. even cows, when they are going to drink water, they have a leader. Which means that it is inherently inhuman that we can do this. This democracy everybody is singing about is good. But to our people, we bring them to the fold so that they can understand what we are talking about. I want that group in the village to understand that that man who they take to be their leader by default is actually a democracy. But they are using a different method to follow him or her. Can we go back to our roots and build and cultivate modern democracy? And we can do it. And it's in our, by the way, we are supposed to have civic education for our people. It is there. Now, all these things you are hearing about media and whatnot comes in another level of economy. Our countries are poor. The next question is, can liberal democracy exist in poor countries? Because that's a very good question to ask, because you are talking about the Sahel, you're talking about Burkina Faso, talking about Niger, you're talking about Guinea-Bissau. Why? Why is it that they're revolting against their colonial masters? Because the colonial masters have turned us into, they become parasite to us. They are taking everything and giving nothing to the people. So, by the way, I don't want anybody to say that those guys made a mistake. I think I've just looked at the economy, the developing, the acceleration of the economy in Niger, Burkina Faso, since the French left, is increased. So let us also sit down and think about it very carefully. Are our brothers and sisters in the Western countries willing to work with us so we can cultivate democracy in our style? And there's no one size shoe in democracy. The sizes are different. The Ugandan one might be different from the Kenyan one. What are those differences? Now, the gap I was telling you is that let's find out how we can entrench democracy, how we can throw that seed in the Bible on the fertile ground so it can grow instead of throwing it on the rock. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you very much, and I wish all of you a pleasant day today. Thank you.
Another round of applause to all panelists. People for us to really get to the heart of the matter. We are going to have a few questions, comments, and observations. But what I pick fit African context, a word which I've forgotten from the Catholic. Can we acculturate democracy? The other one was, I see a debate between procedural and substantive democracy. Even when we have acculturated it, let us not be satisfied by procedural democracy, elections, structures. No, by the deep values for which it stands for. The citizens being strong and holding those in power to account. The realization of tactics of those that want to play authoritarian. One of them is actually deepening fragmentation. And how do you deepen fragmentation? Kingdomization, constituencialization, discretization. When you see many districts being created, many constituencies being created, it's a political design tool to fragment power, disorganize. So what does this has lead to? Organize the organized, political parties, media. Organize the disorganized, the citizens. Organize the unorganized. So unless we organize the disorganized, unless we organize the organized and the disorganized, then we cannot organize democracy. And lastly, institutions should deliver. The executive, the state, the media, the judiciary, their ultimate aim is to make each one of us better. We wish now to open to the plenary. We shall begin with those who are here. We shall take a round of 5. Introduce yourself, where you're coming from, and please take one major premier thought to allow increased participation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Samuel Mwesgwa. I'm a journalist working with Baba TV. My appreciation to Afrobarometer for this engagement. I just have an observation. Goes to Captain Francis Babu. He talks about that maybe Africa we are practicing democracy and it may be a foreign culture. Let's stick to our culture. What is our culture here? And then you say maybe Ugandans or Africans do not understand democracy. It may be true. But Ugandans, the way they may be understanding democracy is accountability for leaders, good governance, and leadership. If that is on table, somebody will say that is democracy. You will not again explain the foreign, the Western. People are waiting for that. But is there political will to put that on table? Then lastly, my friend, my colleague in media, Honorable Winnie brought it well. It is not that media is detached from the public. That's why public doesn't feel sympathy for media. No. Honorable Winnie said, if someone did something and he almost lost life, are you going to do that the following day? You comply. Currently in Uganda and in Africa, media is practicing what they ought not to practice. They know the professionalism. But a third of them, they are not acting professional, because acting profession is revealing the reality. And the reality is exposing the ill. So, I bet we prayed when we are beginning this session. It is only God to redeem Uganda. But Honor Winnie said the car still has some
As you
strength.
conclude, brother.
The car has some strength we drive. I feel like the car no longer have tires, but we can rebrand our own selves. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The next table is a gentleman.
Thank you so much. My name is Fred Malay. Mine goes to Dr. Seru Ambala, automatically Honorable Keys and Captain Babu also have their take. Now, when you look at these graphs, there is one where we had views on multi-party competition. We see the curve in blue which says many parties are needed. Ugandans want many parties. But at the same time, the curve for competition leads to violent conflict is almost at the same level. So how sure are we that in the next survey, this curve for the need for multipartism could go down? Because Ugandans, we know there is a lot of violence. So I would wish the iPod chair could give us an insight on that, and the two renowned politicians. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to encourage ladies in the audience to partake of this. There's one here.
Thank you very much. My name is Rosemary Kemijsha from Uganda Human Rights Commission. I have two observations. I wanted the researchers to explain whether they considered the impact of tokenism on the perceptions that brought out these findings. You already said districtization. We have the number of districts are increasing, the number of constituencies are increasing, number of MPs are increasing, number of women in positions are increasing, the number of media houses are increasing, but are those figures really reflecting, maybe let me ask it this way, who should be the beneficiary of democracy? Are they reflecting the wishes of the beneficiary of democracy? Because democracy to me is being defined by the person who is benefiting from its amoeba-like nature. It should be strict if it's democracy, if it is this. And I was wondering, can you have functioning systems in a generally dysfunctional society? That brings me to the last question I want to ask. Who will bail the cat? We are talking, and we shall keep talking. But what is the starting point? Who is going to take on what the honorables were proposing? So I'm just throwing my thoughts there, but what disturbs me is the tokenism, which makes us believe that we actually have democracy, but the democracy is defined by not the beneficiaries, not there would be beneficiaries, but those that want to what is the correct word? I won't say it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. One of the definitions of politics is who gets what, when, and where. So it's also our democracy. Who is benefiting and what and why? Thank you so much for your deep thoughts. Do we have any other? If not, we can have that one, and then I don't know how we are going to pick the colleagues online. So logistics, please help us note down the questions. Our colleagues online can put the questions on the chat for now. Let's have his question, and then we pick responses.
Thank you very much. My name is Omulangira Kalema. I work with the Impact FM. Now, my question goes to Mr. Chibidi Francis. During your survey, how did you measure democracy? Like at what level? Because when you go down to my mother, maybe you selected her. So which type of question? At what level are you measuring democracy? Because when you look at the colonizers' level, they say democracy is based on permanent opposition. When there is opposition, for example, in Uganda, that means there is democracy. But is it? So at what level? Was it at a local level or international level? Thank you very much.
We can have a round of responses. We can begin with Francis Jr., and then after that you can pass on the microphone.
Thank you much for those very thoughtful questions, and thank you, our panel, for helping us to digest these research findings and to carry it forward. Usually when we sit in our symposiums, in the questionnaire committee, in the sampling committee, in the quality assurances committee, in the data and analysis team meetings, we are looking for ways to present these results. And sometimes you wonder whether the questions you have included and the analysis you've conducted and the presentations you have put together will make a lot of sense and generate interest, stakeholders. And seeing this range of responses and questions gives us with a lot of satisfaction to say, okay, this is, probably well done, but also challenges us to do more. I'm going to respond to the two questions that I think have been directed to me from our sister from Uganda Human Rights and my brother. In a briefest, and I save time for our panel to share more expoundingly. So number one, who benefits, and can we have a functional system in a dysfunctional system? A big question. When we looked at the data, and particularly at the status of democracy where Uganda lies today in the eyes of public opinion, we see that we have a chance as a country to make strides if we attend to a key structural and sometimes programming themes, such as the ones you have raised. And we did recommend and emphasize the need for stronger institutions. Democracy cannot stand unless it is standing on strong institutions. Professor Kareija is from a management institute. I think he can put that for us in better black and white. But what we understand from a researcher's point of view is that we need institutions that appear, at least in the eyes of the common man, to stand on their own and to stand on the side of democracy, that they cannot be shaken, moved, directed, or otherwise put off course where their mandate concerns. So such institutions would help us to guide, but also to ensure that we have safeguards. I think your question is very, very much valid, especially when we talk about the extent to which we have. It is not bad to decentralize power, fine, but to what extent? You know, so they are sometimes, each time when we are, for instance, drawing the sample, we have to go back and say, how many districts do we have? Because you may just, we've lost count. You may not know how many there are. But those are the bigger local governments. They are smaller ones that you forget. So you are right that public opinion needs to be considered when these structural changes are taking place. I know it is in the best interest to bring services closer to the people, but like you have asked, have they benefited? Now, number two, Omulangira, you've asked, how did we measure democracy? We've tried to measure democracy in the context, in the African environment, not context, but environment, on the continent of Africa for now nearly 25 years, from the year 1999. And when we started, I'm trying to give you a historical perspective to kind of situate the answer I'm going to give you. We started off trying to understand if we Africans understand democracy at all, and if we do, what does it mean to us? So we found over the years that the number of Africans who can at least volunteer a meaning, a response to say democracy means this to me, was growing. And later on, everyone that we interviewed could at least give us three different meanings, three different ways in which they understand democracy. But we also saw regional implications, like, for instance, here, democracy was more of rights, whereas democracy in the West African part of the continent was more about freedom in terms of association and ability to be able to associate. Here we were like, we can associate, we can enter any group, but can we speak freely? So these notions, so for us, what we've measured as democracy, like we've shared here, is demand for these democratic norms. These so beautifully well portrayed ideas, ideals of fairness, of freedom, of equity, of equality. Those are the people, those are the values that people cherish to have. But when, for instance, they go to the market to buy food, they say, are we equal? When, for instance, they check to see if they can have money to afford health care, they say, are we equal? So it's when we say, okay, can we, in the attempt to answer to this growing demand for democracy, also improve the quality, the efficiency of service delivery? I think my take that we'll end with before I hand the mic to the panel is to say, we've looked at very many, we showed you a large table. I didn't go through each and one of those factors that we have used to estimate their relative influence to people's views and perceptions of democracy. But there is one that I think I can build on here. The idea that we want, as Africans, more political parties to increase the level of choices we can have when we are electing our leaders. But at the same time, we are so dissatisfied with the way multi-party politics has worked, because each time parties compete for political office, as they should in a democracy, in our case, there is violent conflict. Now, we needed to find ways as a country to bring our leaders together, because our political leaders can't talk to each other. And currently, there are political parties that if they asked you to bring them on the table, you are like, which one do I call? Is it party version A, party version B? And it is very unhealthy. Now, probably let me tell you this as I close, that to some of us who have sworn to be non-partisan, you may say, those things don't concern me. Those are political parties, right? But no, because those political parties are constitutionally mandated vehicles to drive your level of democracy forward. You should care when they are in a turmoil. Because when they are suffering, when they can't breathe, so to speak, your democracy won't as well, and you won't also enjoy it. Because certainly what we have chosen in that referendum of 2005 to go multi-party meant that we should have these as viable vehicles. We have more data we can share in that regard, but I think the extent to which we can dialogue, the extent to which we can smile on the same table and talk more substantively rather than exclude, victimize others as political parties, I think there our democracy will go another step. I would stop here.
I wonder why Captain Babu wants me to. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there was a question that was addressed to me, speaking particularly to the appetite of Ugandans for multi-party democracy, and yet it is juxtaposed with conflict. And I want to premise myself on 3 things. One, the people that have done development theory and practice will tell you that even the developed countries, the first world countries that we know of, before they go to that level, there was there is a tendency of development coming with an increase in the level of violence or conflict. And I would like to let you know that on this road for democracy in Uganda, conflict is inevitable. Those that have studied the conflict, you know the various perspectives to conflict. The conflict is human. For as long as we live, it is inevitable. It is also relational. Captain Babu talked about it. But in the midst of that, from the perspective of iPod, I remember in 2018, there was a political leader of, and they are still political leaders, who came to the Secretariat and said that, you know, President Museveni has continuously kept away. Please, even if it means us meeting and having a cup of tea with him, it is enough. And one of my contentions as a student of democracy is that the democratic values are something that grows over time. For me, I looked at it at that time as, okay, an appreciation to a certain level. So we need to know that some of these things take baby steps. Now, much more particular to your question, 2026, we are going to get into elections. And I can tell you, without fear of contradiction, that if the current environment in which we operate is sustained, we will definitely have conflict in 2026. Why? If our leaders close the spaces of expression and participation, it's going to happen. And this is not only to government, even parties on the opposition. For as long as that is happening, we will have conflict. Then two, if we do not partake of the opportunities that are aimed at generating a common agenda, what kind of Uganda do we want for the future? If we do not participate, let me also tell you that in Uganda, I will not mention the others, but in conflict management, they are what we call suppliers of violence. One of the constituencies that are known to be suppliers of violence are the youth. So if the youth are not engaged, are not mobilized, they will still supply violence in 2026. So one of the things that we are working on majorly in IPOD is to ensure that in the build-up to 2026, our leaders come together. This Uganda will outlive everybody. If our leaders do not want to come together and talk to each other, then, ladies and gentlemen, I am giving you an assurance that violence in 2026 will be there. How we can mitigate against that is, we need to come together. We need to come together and talk about the future of this country, the Uganda that we want.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you.
And when you are talking about suppliers of violence, I had people whispering to each other that, but there are other ones. Who are they? Dicta, your thoughts.
Okay, so Lawrence introduces an interesting concept that about going through violence as we develop. I don't believe in inevitability of things. I believe we have the ability to change our fate, and the fact that we have seen other countries do it. For example, in this report itself, we have Tanzania not taking the path of violence and getting where it is. We can say the same for Zambia. In fact, it means there are other ways we can avoid violence. On the question of the media and torture. So let's remember that in this report, the public thinks we have media freedom. And there is a reason for that. For the past 3 years or so, so like 2022 and back, I wasn't going much to the field, but because I also edit. But these days, every time I attend a press conference, I am shocked. An official will say something that I expect like 10 questions on that statement, and surprisingly, reporters will get their phone or whatever recording tool they have, put it there. Once that person is done speaking, they ask for the Uganda version and they walk away. That is not a function of torture from the state. That is a function of people going through the motions of work, either because their employers are not paying them or because their employers are asking them for too much that they cannot deliver. I have also worked as an editor and been shocked by editors where you actually tell her or him, if we do this, this story will be better. And it's a simple thing, and someone is unwilling to do it. So I'd like to say it's not just a function of torture. It's the fact that media houses have shrunk themselves so much in pursuit of profit, so that there is limited interest in delivering good work. Media houses focus so much on getting government advertisement that they do not want to rock that boat. Media houses focus so much on getting advertisement from major private sector that they don't want to rock that boat. And the only way we can change that is finding fresh sources of money, and that includes involving the public, because if the public is paying or contributing one way or another for the work we do, then we shall be able to deliver in the interest of the public. It is not just the state that is stopping the media from performing its work. It's a lot more complicated than that, and I don't blame torture for some of our failures. I think we would do better even with the limited freedom of expression that we have now, because we are not Rwanda, that's for sure. Yeah, that's it for me.
Much. Honorable Winnie. So you still have space, the media, to push the boundaries.
Thank you so much, and as I possibly conclude, I would like to once again thank the Afrobarometer for highlighting these issues. Somehow they will enable us to think, they will enable us to plan as political actors. But going back to the questions that were asked, I will say that political parties, according to the research, presented a risk of violence, and that is what my brother and good friend Malé did allude to, that while people think it's very important to have political parties for purposes of availing us enough choices, but they feel that political parties are a recipe to violence. Why do political parties kind of become a recipe to violence? I will still take it back to the political will that I talked about from the beginning. When you have a state that does not believe in a system under which it is running, all are the issues that you will get into. When you have a democracy that has eroded the tenets of good governance and the pillars of democracy, that institutions of government have been fused into an individual, then you will have a recipe for violence when it comes to elections. Why am I saying this? When you look at countries in the report that have had a recession in terms of democracy, and recent times where we are seeing countries that are resorting to coups, they are countries that have used the military against the population during elections. When the military is used to participation in elections, they have this feeling that if we are the ones sustaining the leadership, then we can do it ourselves. And so you will find that those who have been meting violence upon the citizens during campaigns, and that is why majority of us are saying, you know, political parties are vibrant when it is only campaign time. When campaigns are over, political parties go into recess. Do you ever ask yourselves why political parties seem to be in recess when there is no election? By the way, even when there is an election, do political parties which are not in government operate freely and at a same leveled ground like those that are in government? We are alive to what happened in 2020 when we are into the build-up to the elections of 2021. That those who were on the opposition could not be allowed to interact with the people, purportedly that there is COVID, while those in the ruling government were allowed to freely meet people. For them, they didn't have COVID. I kept asking myself, was COVID a sickness of the opposition? That it's only members of the opposition that were going to continue supplying COVID? Or was COVID an instrument that was used to curtail people's freedom of association and therefore freedom of expression of their interests, the army was excessively used to kill people on the streets of Kampala. Unfortunately, even government accepted and said, yes, we record 54 bodies on the streets of Kampala. What does this speak to you as a person who wants to participate in democracy? As a believer in good governance, does this speak anything to you? After elections, you are supposed to ask for police authorization to go to the population and engage the citizens, enable them to have the competencies to hold their leaders accountable. Are people allowed to freely move, converse their supporters, tell them what to do, allow them to mobilize and possibly build structures that will enable them to have a free and fair election, to enable them to participate in a democracy that can work? As I conclude, I go back to the cultural values and norms that hold us together as a people. And going back to what we are now getting excited about, what Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere did in his country, building a unified Tanzania under the Ujamaa system. Here, our constitution is talking about all our ethnicities. And we are saying, okay, let's live in unity, in diversity. But as we live in unity and diversity, our moderator put it clearly, we are constructing a district for each tribe, a constituency for each tribe, maybe even a village for an ethnicity. This does not help us to unite. It actually widens the gap between the same citizens of the same nation. At the same time, you will realize that these, someone was asking, I think it is that the representative of, and I'm sorry, moderator, the representative of the Human Rights Commission, that do you ever imagine that tokenism is one of the issues that are killing democracy? I will say yes. Captain Babu talked about people voting just like that, anything into position of leadership. Others have been voting because of the money that they receive. Others have been voting because of the situation, the economic situation that we are in. You don't have the basics of life. Someone comes with 1,000 and you forget that this is a person who is supposed to serve you, that you have been in that situation because they failed on their job, and you say thank you. The following day you are going to vote. Tokenism has been an issue. The supply of constituencies and districts is another way of patronage, and I would call it as also tokenism. The supply of constituencies and possibly villages is also another way of tokenism, so that people begin to think that it's those that have supplied them with the districts and constituencies that think about their well-being. They no longer care whether they have service delivered to them or not. They no longer care whether they are beaten by the army during an election, as long as it is their son or daughter that has benefited from the scrum and partition. And so we need to go further to interrogate why there is violence during an election, and most especially in an area where we are talking about multi-party politics. We need to interrogate further. Who does the violence? Can we be able to speak to those who are violating the real norms and ideals of democracy to go slow? And who will bail the cat? We go back to it. Who will speak to them and say, go slow? It is still you and me, because the power is in our hands, as for the Constitution currently.
You know, when ladies talk, you don't clap, you guys, eh? Well, that's when you should clap more. Don't clap for me. Clap. Ladies and gentlemen, I want us to sometimes stop textbook definitions. There's too much textbook definition. Mwesugwa is giving me textbook definition. No. Politics, management of society. Let's apply it to yourself. When you go to your home, how do you manage your home? How do you manage your neighbors? How do you manage a village? How do you manage a parish? Politics is management of society. That's what the Westerns are telling us. But how does it apply to our culture? You were asking me about my culture. My culture here is that there's a way we manage ourselves at home. Father, mother, children, our culture. When you are born, the first day you fall down, culture takes over. Today, in abundance, you go to religion. The third day, you go to school. Those are cultures building up. Now, I am saying the wireless liberal democracy, which is Western democracy, is being brought here. How do we infuse it with our own culture so that we understand it in our DNA? Are you with me now? Now, this is where culture comes in. Is it good? For example, the Western people are telling us about human rights. Is what is going on in Palestine human rights? Time has come for you to start questioning these things. So, practice is politics. You're asking me about governance and therefore accountability. That's auditing. That's simple management. It's very simple management. How they have spent their money. That's auditing. It's for accountants. Let's get to the real thing. How do you want, you as Ugandans, how do you feel somebody should lead you? We have something in Uganda here called Oburungi Bwansi. What does Oburungi Bwansi mean? So some people say, oh, it's digging roads. No. Oburungi Bwansi means everything from your home to everywhere, how to behave. In fact, Baganda have even a better word, Omugunjufu. Somebody who behaves. You behave. You respect others. You respect elders. All those are part of democracy. These people respect each other. There is a place, today in America, they talk about democracy. There is separation of powers. In America, the Senate, the president of it is the vice president of America. Where is the separation of powers there? These guys, they tell you things, but they do it differently in their place. In America, they don't have popular vote. They have an electoral college electing the president. That's the democracy you want? So these are things we should start questioning. So Mwesigwa, when some of us say that our culture and our DNA should now try and get this Western democracy, liberal democracy, and see how we can infuse the two so that we can come out with something that works for us. Next, and very quickly, violence is a result of behavior, is a behavioral problem. She said there are 52 people who died. 54. What happened? What really happened? I remember somebody also burnt a police station. I remember somebody used a hammer on a policewoman. So whenever you talk, become honest. We are not honest. We are dishonest people. When I say honest, why? Because a man called Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore came out with 3 letters that built the whole of Singapore. The first word was meritocracy. Put the right people in the right places. The second word was pragmatism. Make your people do what is for them, not for other people. Lastly, the word H stood for honesty. Are we honest? You start a party. I'm sorry, I don't agree with you about parties. In simple common sense, they have told us there are 2 sides to the bell. There is communism, where everybody, the whole population owns. Then there is something called capitalism on the other side. In between, you have different things. If you told me your ideology falls between those, I would understand you. But you are now telling me you want to have as many parties as you want. For what? We want parties that give us an ideology that is going to manage our society. Are we capitalists? Are we communists? Are we socialists? What are we? So when you say you want many parties, and then you start a party, say, tomorrow I've started a party, I'm going to remove that government next week. There won't be a government next week. What do you expect the government to do to you? Ladies and gentlemen, let's become serious. You stand up and say, next week I'll be in State House, the government will be gone. That is a party. My party is to remove government by hook or crook. That is a party. I'm now coming to this because we are now talking, we have to be honest to each other. Somebody says, that man is of this tribe, he's like this, he's like that. In Baganda, oyempisa zensi ufu. Tibavuma bantu. Tell him, I don't agree with you because of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Finished. You don't insult me and you expect me to look at you when I have the power. Let me give you a quick word about power. A young lecturer, very pretty young lady, comes into it. She's the professor. Goes into a lecture room. And the lady said, are you the assistant to the professor? She says, no, I am the professor. So a young man makes a crack that she's pretty and all that. This professor turns around, looks at this young man, says, what's your name? He said, my name is George. He said, oh, George, yes. Do you know what power? Can you define power? George mumbles one or two. I say, let me tell you what power is. I am the professor. I can make you or unmake you. I can make your future not come true. That is power. Ladies and gentlemen, power is the person who holds it and he can use it to do whatever he wants unless if you control that power. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you very much.
Another round of applause for our panelists. Let's hear from our colleagues online. Anyone online that would like to share their thoughts? It appears there is none. I therefore want to once again thank the panel for an excellent job done. And I think now it's time to hand over back to Francis Jr. to tell us, to conclude this part of the journey. Thank you so much. I think our major takeaways are we need to redefine democracy, infuse it with African values. It's high time that we revisit the Constitution, which guides us on what we do. We should build and strengthen the citizens so that they are competent to keep demanding for democracy. Build and strengthen institutions. How do we strengthen institutions? By infusing values so that they serve the purpose for which they were created. And lastly, as we hold those who are in power to account, let's also pursue the idea that even for them, it is in their best interest if their legitimacy is out of service delivery, if their legitimacy is out of substantive values of democracy, fairness, justice, because at the end of the day, we want to get more opportunities as citizens. We want to get better. When I go to a hospital, get medicine. When I go to school, get education. When I go to police station, get justice. Thank you so much, Afrobarometer. I'm associated to the Julius Nyerere Leadership Center, and I'm glad that you are one of the disciples of Julius Nyerere. We believe that he's one of the icons for the African values in governance. And I want to invite Afrobarometer and Hatchstyle in another space to come to us at Julius Nyerere Leadership Center so that we have another conversation. Thank you so much, Francis, and back to you.
Another big hand clap to our panel and our moderator. I would really want to pass very sincere thanks to you all. To our panel for a job well done, and thank you all for staying up late. I will, in a moment, hand over to my colleague Moses to make some administrative announcements and also to share his regards. But I think I would also want to request members of the Afrobarometer team at Harchild to just stand so we can together thank our guests. So I see Pius in the corner, Joseph, Madrine, Dora, Annette, Angela, please. Thank you to the team for inviting all of us. You did a great job to organize. We are looking to hold another event like this before the year closes and hopefully before the month closes. As I said, there are events we host like this that are, to everyone, but we are also trying to organize what we refer in-house as high-level dissemination events, but they are just specialized engagements. Like, for instance, we can go to an institution when we have data that speaks about the work that they do. For instance, if we have anti-corruption data that we would want to share with civil society or government, we've done so previously. And we can organize such events to come and show in their boardroom, to share one-on-one, to be able to get these views understood by those who can use them. Personally, I would say it's been a good day. Thank you for staying up this late. I don't want to take more of your time. I will invite Moses for his.
Thank you. A lot has already been. I won't add in anything more. Thank you for being here with us. And as Francis said, that this was a big survey that had many themes. So we are disseminating these themes on. More will be released in the future. And to mention a little bit, we are going back to the field soon to collect new data because this is almost 2 years since we collected we were last in the field. So we are going back to the field and collect more data. So mine is a small notice, and what I want to mention is that we have a small token of transport that will be provided at that table at the entrance. So please, you can move there in an orderly manner to get your token. So I think if for the media, Francis will be available to do a small interview with you. So you will be available at the appropriate time. And then the other thing is that maybe Francis didn't, you might have talked about it. This data is used around the world. And it's used at universities. It's used by states, institutions like the World Bank, UNDP, and even the last summit, the US-Africa Summit, you remember it was somewhere in July, if I can remember very well. The White House invited Afrobarometer to provide the data that will be used for that summit. So USA wanted to talk to African leaders, and the source where they could get some data to talk about was Afrobarometer. So the credibility about this data is well known. So after that, there will also be some lunch. There will be some coupons that will be distributed around. So please join us for lunch. Thank you.
Yep, the lunch coupons at the reception desk. So please feel free to pick a coupon, and we can continue with the discussion over lunch and online. And I don't know if I gave everyone our contacts. Let me do so. I will give a colleague to put on each table for those who so wish. And let's keep in touch and keep the conversation going. Thank you very much.